The urge to save humanity is almost always a false face for the urge to rule it. H.L. Mencken. Hello, my name is John Rose. In part 2 of this video series, I'm going to once again take a quick look at the Willie Lynch letter, The Making of a Slave. In this part 2, I'm going to take a closer look at one of the things Willie said you have to do. He said you have to make a list of the differences, and then you make them bigger. Remember, my friends, the people who are sick enough to do this, the people who rule the world, are psychopaths. They're con artists. They're masters of illusion. And the MO of a psychopath is divide and conquer. They know there's something wrong with them. They always got in trouble when they were young. They had to pay attention to what we're doing just to figure out what to do. And if that's the type of person you are, what's the best defense? Well, you always got to put yourself off the radar, don't you? You got to take the attention away from you, don't you? That's divide and conquer. So that's what these people did. That's how you keep the slaves enslaved. It goes back to that famous speech by Martin Luther King. 24 hours within his death, he knew he was going to die. They were coming after him. And he was trying to help warn his people. He was pleading with them, look, when I'm gone, these sick bastards are going to use an old favorite formula of the pharaohs. And they're going to get you to fight amongst yourselves. So that's what old Willie did. Made a list of the differences, make them bigger. And then to really confuse everything, they introduced crossbreeding. And that, again, creates divisions of labor, more illusions. So remember, in order to keep people enslaved, you have to keep them ignorant of their history. That's why old Willie said, you can't let them speak their mother tongue. You got to teach them a new language. You got to create illusions through diversity. So this is what they do to us. Just like in old Willie Lynch's letter, you get the old men to fight against the young men against the old men, the old women against the young women against the old women, the men against the women, the light color against the dark color, different labor against a different labor. It's all about divide and conquer. One of the biggest weapons these sick people have is racial tension. And as Willie pointed out in his letter, they rely on mistrust instead of trust. They know it's stronger. They know that envy is stronger than admiration. So they work on our weaknesses. And remember, none of this could happen if it wasn't for the fall of mankind. What we have here, my friends, is the sickest of us exploiting the sickness in us. Trust should be our strength, not our weakness. And that's why I always say that if we don't change our mentality, nothing's going to change. And how do you do that? Well, it begins by gaining back one of your senses. And of course, that's just the beginning, because we have to de-indoctrinate all the bullshit that's been bombarded in our brains. So, I wish it was as simple as just getting reconnected. We've got to realize that most of what we think is true is not true. Indeed, we must sit down before fact like a little child and be prepared to give up every preconceived notion. We got to empty our cup in order to fill it up with the right knowledge. And where do we start? Well, we got to make this easy for ourselves. We got to make thinking easier. Now, what did they do in biblical days? Well, you know, in biblical days, it was a law that if you were to enter an institute of higher learning, you had to do a 40-day water fast. Why? Well, they knew that you would think better with cleaner blood. In fact, as soon as you start putting food in your stomach, you take away energy down up here. So if you really want to think better, stop eating, go on a solid food vacation. So that's where everything begins for us to get back to where we need to be. If we want to break this master-slave relationship, we have to understand how we're being manipulated, how we're getting distracted by fighting amongst ourselves. I'm telling you, my friends, the people who rule the world understand us, but we don't understand them. But they're not that hard to figure out. I highly recommend watching this documentary, Defense Against the Psychopath. It's only 37 minutes long. It'll give you a really good idea of what we're up against. I also highly recommend reading the Con Artist Handbook. If you don't know how you're being conned, or if you don't know how to con someone, then you don't know when you're being conned. And we're being conned all the time. The hardest part of all of this, though, is our brain just isn't working. That's why it's so important to take a solid food vacation. Start off by taking a solid food vacation. Then start looking into how the world works and to see what you can do to make a difference. We've got to do a lot of work downstream. We've got to reestablish the family structure, which is what this whole thing is all about. And remember, the urge to save humanity is almost always a false face for the urge to rule it. Just about every type of grassroots revolt we have out there is initiated by this sick group of people. In fact, they have a long-term range for world domination, and it's disguised as a spontaneous grassroots revolt. They're the ones that are behind feminism. You know, they get behind a lot of causes that we know there's a good basis for it, but then they twist it and end up doing the same thing that this Willie Lynch letter did. They got us to change the roles. Again, that's what they're doing to us now. I remember a while back when I was studying Aaron Rousseau, and Nicholas Rockefeller was trying to befriend him and try to get him to join the CFR. And Rockefeller confided in Rousseau and said, look, my family foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, started the women's lib movement for the purpose to double the tax money. Remember, all the tax money goes to pay the interest on the taxes. So that was one big goal. Let's double our tax base. But the main reason was to take down the family structure so that the state can now raise the children. Remember, Willie Lynch, they wanted to put these women in a frozen state of psychological fear so that they would train their children in a role reversal. And now, instead of having the woman do that, we're letting the state do it. So there are so many things we have to do downstream. There's problems with the educational system, there's problems with the government, there's problems all over the place. And there's only one solution. It begins with each and every one of us. We all play a role to be the best that we can be, and then do our part as we can downstream in whatever area you think your specialty is in. But the main thing, and the only thing we have to do initially, is to just get reconnected. We need to see what we're missing. It's hard to change what we've been doing for decades, and the best way to do it is to take a solid food vacation. When you take a solid food vacation for the appropriate length of time, you're going to flush out a serpent, you're going to bump up your biophotons. Your brain's going to start thinking better and clearer. You're going to finally understand the real cause to our problems, and then you'll be able to look at different versions of different stories and realize bullshit, 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 bullshit. Vaccines, bullshit. Chemotherapy, bullshit. Germ theory, bullshit. I'm telling you, my friends, you have to have a brand new reference. I know that more than anything else. All the things I put together, I realize that the average person has way too many references that support a bunch of bullshit. There's only one way to challenge that many references. It's with a brand new reference. That's when we test an idea's time has come, and you know, my friends, when you do, you're in for a treat.